2023 Natural Resources Joint Advisory Group meeting, and we're going to start with public comment. And Marion Jordan is with us today, so you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I signed up. Anyway, so I just wanted to alert everyone to the fact that Armin, with 7 co-sponsors, is sponsoring a talk by Professor Bernard Blousie from Cornell University on deer. He's one of the, at least the East Coast's most prominent expert in this area. He's done scientific studies on tree rejuvenation to study the impact of deer browse on red seedling repopulation. He's done work on sterilization and other different management strategies. So it's going to be, I think, a very informative program. So I encourage everyone to come. We have 250 people signed up so far. So It definitely shows there's interest in this topic. And I think it's good. So I just have one copy of this. I'll leave it at the end. It's got a QR code, and you can go onto our website and register through Eventbrite. So thank you.
Do you want to, if you send that to us too, we could send it to each of the commissions.
Oh, that'd be excellent. I have a soft copy of this. Yes, I'll let people know.
If you could email it, that would be great. Okay, good.
Thank you
very much. I'm going to go ahead and introduce everyone so that our speaker will know who's here. Mr. Murray, thank you very much for being here. We really appreciate it. We've met with the Forestry and Natural Resource Commission. Joan
McIntyre, Chair of the Climate Change, Energy and Environment Commission.
Jill Barker, Vice Chair of the Parks and Recreation Commission.
David Howell, Forestry and Natural Resources Commission.
And Mary, we already introduced. And
I'm Jennifer Souls. I'm a Natural Resource Specialist with the Natural Resource Unit.
And so we're missing, I know, 2 of our other chairs of the Park and Recreation Commission. She's out of the country, and the Forestry and Natural Resource Commission, Phil Klingelhofer, is also out of the country. And I know a couple other, we had conflicts. So we're a small group tonight, but we're really appreciate you being here with us to talk about this topic that's near and dear to a lot of our hearts. So as I said, we're pretty informal. And Jen Fioretti, I believe, is also on. Do you want to introduce yourself, Jen?
Sure. Yes, I'm Jennifer Fioretti, Deputy Director, Department of Parks and Recreation, just here to listen and learn. Thanks.
Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. Okay, so Mr. Murray is the Chief of the Inspections Division for the Department of Community Planning, Housing and Development for Arlington County. And we've had some conversations with the chairs of the Park and Recreation Commission, the Forestry and Natural Resource Commission, and the Climate Change and Environment Energy. I always said that wrong. Energy and Environment Commission. So anyway, this is a follow-on to that. So we're looking to figure out what we can do to make changes to Article 2, Section 10 of the ordinance to somehow accommodate managed natural landscapes. So I told Mr. Murray that we didn't need a formal presentation, but we just wanted to hear from him as to what would make the most sense for next steps and sort of what his thinking is along that line. So I will turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you. As I was introduced, I'm the Chief Building Official for Arlington County. And as part of that, I'm also recently were appointed as a property maintenance official. So let me just give an explanation. Property maintenance code enforcement has been under my part of my division for the past 16.5 years that I've been here. But before I joined here, there was officially a property maintenance official that was here prior to me. And that position actually reported to me as one of my team managers, section chiefs, for that matter. By the way, I'm going to pause for a minute. Jennifer, you're not here just to learn things. I'm going to put you on the spot in a minute. So I'm giving you forewarning on that one.
Which Jennifer? We have 2, so you can put them both on the spot.
No, Jennifer Fioretti. Okay, so just give her a heads up on that one. Upon the property maintenance official, county manager appointed me as the property maintenance official as well as building official. No, I didn't get any pay raise, but additional responsibilities. Although I oversaw that unit, but one of the things I started doing, and this is fairly new, about 4 or 5 months ago, this happened. One of the things I wanted to do is, with regard to the building codes, I just want to let you guys, there is a kind of separation of church and state, for lack of better term. I enforce the state building code, the property maintenance official, in that case, enforce the Virginia maintenance code. So while that position reported to me, I couldn't really tell that person what to do. I could deal with the personnel issue, the organization issue, but in terms of the enforcement or adaptation, there was that separation exists. The same way I always say I have a separation. I often talk to the leaders in the organization. I said, I'm kind of quasi-constitutional on the side, although I report to everybody. But my job is kind of a little bit different because it's established by the state law. So I don't want to belabor that point that much. But the point was, when I took over about 4 or 5 months ago at this additional role, I wanted to look at all the standards. Obviously, state building code is established in Richmond, so we don't have too much say in that one. But in terms of some of the local ordinances, one was Chapter 10, care of premise, that was assigned to code enforcement. I wanted to take a look at that. And this was an opportunity for me because this thing hadn't been changed since 1950s. Forgive me if I'm misquoting it, but it's been so long ago there was a change to this. And my attempt was, first of all, to take a look at it, see what's missing. We recognize that commercial properties were missing from this local ordinance. And the second thing, I wanted to have some additional tools to enforce the care of promise. So those were really the basic premise for us changing it and requesting to advertise. Having nothing to do, I didn't know anything, as most of you figured out in our last meeting. I didn't know anything about weeds and differentiation between that and what is prominent for the group. And I said it very frankly that, I'm a building guy. I'm an engineer. I'm a building official. I deal with buildings. I don't know nothing about vegetation or trees from that perspective. When you guys brought that to my attention, and I thank you for submitting some languages to differentiate between a weed that basically the ordinance says DI shall maintain it below a certain level, and what is very important to the group and the different commissions. And thank you for sending some suggested language. I think at the end of the day, it doesn't take too much effort to add a description of what weed is. I think when I mentioned in the last meeting was I need to find a way, if we introduce a new language for how we define weeds, I need to find a way for enforceability of that, because if I go look at it, I wouldn't know the difference between something that needs to be protected versus something that, is just simply a weed. So I think in the last meeting, I reported out that I'm going to discuss this, bring it up to my bosses and perhaps the county manager. So we've had some internal meeting. I think I'm going to report on what we are to the county manager tomorrow. We have a time about 10 o'clock in the morning, somewhere around that time. We're going to talk about it. While I don't think that introduction of a workable definition is in order. Um, my only reservation is I don't know what I don't know with regard this particular, and I don't know the unintended, whatever it is, unintended consequences. So, one of the things that I like to do, because I think this particular issue you brought to my attention is worthy of some discussion, public discussion around this. So what I really like to do is get this ordinance from the enforceability, from the things that I didn't intend to, that I intended to address, because nothing changed with regard to the definition of weed. We just left that intact. We just went to some of the technical aspects of the ordinance, such as introducing some civil citations. What I really like to do is move this forward so I can get this piece of it right, because it's been wrong for so many years, 30 plus years. And then my commitment to the group is that through the help of DPR, because they're in the middle of a study, and that's when I want to talk to Jennifer, then we can actually have a dialogue uh, to see what's the right thing to do, what's the right definition, uh, have a discussion about when my inspector goes out, which is a building science inspector, deals with building, how do I differentiate what tools that I have in order to make sure I'm not asking somebody to cut something that needs to be protected. So that's really um, my wish and kind of my ask, with the understanding that I am more than happy to engage the different groups and the community in large, because I think it deserves a different degree of attention that I can see in the, just the technical changes. So that's really my report to you at this point. I'll have more information when I talk to the county manager tomorrow and discuss. But I did want to, Jennifer Fioretti, if you don't mind, I'm going to tap on you and see, because you're in the middle of a study, and I'd like to wait until find out what you guys come up with before I attempt to introduce some language into the chapter 10, which is well beyond my expertise.
Sure. So thank you, Shariar. So and the Enerjag is the oversight body that helps inform and provide guidance on the development of the forestry and natural resource plan, which is what you're referring to, just for those other people who are listening in. And so one of the things that we heard pretty loud and clear as part of our engagement work when we released the first draft is that um, the public wanted to see more on addressing the weed ordinance and encouraging naturalized areas using native plantings on private and public property. And so while we are currently in the process of absorbing all of that public comment, we do anticipate on having something that addresses this need in the subsequent draft that's released. So does that help answer your question? So I guess the point is with a master plan, we're not going to actually prescribe the exact changes that we want to see in the ordinance. What we will say is that this is something that we want to work on or to improve, right, going forward. So there is an opportunity to do that work if the county wants to have us do that. If the county board approves it as part of the adopted plan.
Thank you, Jennifer. I guess the point, again, I said it on top of the hour when we met last time. That's a really first time, and I appreciate you guys reaching out. That's the first time I was aware of such value and the concern of the different commissions and the group. And, you know, when we left that meeting, I said, well, it seems pretty darn easy to introduce a definition as long as we know and I can enforce it, you know, and we talk about who is defining this, what resources may be available to me when it comes to that. So I can reach out and say, hey, is this one of the things that one of the vegetation that needs to be protected or not? Having said that, since this is, you know, I've been local government for 37 years and county, having said that, I just don't have enough knowledge of this subject matter to say it's as easy as, you know, the process will be easy to introduce a new language, but I just don't know enough about the subject matter without opening up the conversation to a larger group than particularly this group. And I know you guys are representative of many different commissions, but, you know, to be frank with you, I just don't know what I don't know with regard to this particular subject. So that's really my wishes. If you ask me what I want to do, my commitment to the group is that I'm totally open to start a dialogue and bring its people that know a hell of a lot more about the subject matter than I do. But I, at the same time, I want to say that I really would like to move this piece of it that has nothing to do with weeds. So I have some tools to actually enforce the county code the way it was intended. Certainly, you brought up uh, something to my forefront of my mind. So next time I'm going to go write a ticket and say to some homeowner that, hey, you got to cut this weed. I think now I know enough to ask somebody, is this supposed to be, is this weed or is this some vegetation that should be protected? So I can tell you that much, that I certainly not going to call every weed a weed. Uh, thank you for bringing that to my attention. So let me stop talking and pause for a minute, see if any of this makes sense or you have any questions regarding this.
Okay, I'll open it up to commissioners first. David?
Go ahead.
Joan?
Well, I just say it'd probably be nice if we could set a timeline. I don't know that we necessarily need to tie it directly to approval of the forestry and natural resources plan, since, you know, we're all kind of in agreement that should be in there to begin with. So why not move forward and you've got something to check off your list pretty quickly.
And I think when we met earlier too, this is definitely not a new issue for us. We've been dealing with this since 2016. I know we've met with people in your office, didn't meet with you, but did meet with other people in your office over the years. And so from our perspective, it's super frustrating. Here we go again, and here more delay, and you know, more enforcement actions by complaint, and the same problems that we've had all along. Anyway, David, before I go on and on.
I would like eventually to comment on your commentary. Go ahead, David.
Thank you. So I have not been involved in this issue as long as some others have. So I want to ask a couple of naive questions. So right now the ordinance is about basically grass or other things that have happened to grown up in someone's yard being too tall, right?
12 inches in height.
12 inches or more. It doesn't have anything to do with what type of vegetation that is. And if
that's a current ordinance.
Who's trained to distinguish that anyway, right?
Correct.
Okay. Now, what about yards where there's been so much neglect that everything's died off and it's just dirt and it's eroding all over the place? Would that be also?
No, that is, you know, it deals with certain aspect of the yard. It deals with trash, debris, and overgrown vegetation.
Okay.
Really, this particular chapter 10 this particular article of Chapter 10 deals with those things and blight in general.
Right, okay. So, and there wouldn't be any particular focus if someone had an extremely invasive species that was spreading seeds all over the place, as opposed to just a weed, which it's a little confusing under the state laws, but
No, this
not
this
all weeds are.
basically this and I think I know where you're going with that one. This one really deals with, that's why it's part of a code enforcement, because the state property maintenance code deals with building, how you maintain a building. This is basically about that. It is not about spreading something. You just want to make sure that the property is maintained, so it's not unsightly.
So then my last question is, for that connection, I understand the rationale for that connection to the property, the improved property. This is seen as part of the packaging of an improved property, but it's not the same thing as a landscape inspection. And it doesn't really have to do with environment, ecology, or anything else that might pertain to the health of our ecosystem in Arlington. It just has to do with degradation of the property itself.
Correct.
So I'm just wondering if what would be ideal for Arlington is really something quite different from what is already in the ordinance that has to do with structures and safety and standards, and not really having to do with the kinds of things that we would want to focus on for a sustainable environment and the kinds of things that many of the topics in the Forestry and Natural Resources Plan would be addressing. Is that a fair thing to say, or am I missing some pieces?
Well, that unfortunately with this part here, this ordinance goes, I kind of inherited this ordinance when I came to the county back in 2007. And I inherited the fact that they were told that code enforcement is going to enforce this. So you really, I think the origin of this goes back to 1950s and 1960s. So I don't know what it is. To be honest with you, I much rather deal with the building rather than the weeds and vegetation. So I actually, if you are able to take that one after Chapter 10, I welcome that one. Okay, I truly welcome, because really I want to deal with building and building safety rather than vegetation. So on that note, that's my personal opinion. I'm being selfish, this is a very sensitive issue, but I don't know what the predecessor thought when they enabled this. Probably they weren't thinking at the time. They were just looking at the optics, right? Make sure the house doesn't look too bad, so it doesn't bring my property value, which I'm next door neighbor, down, because it looks unkept. I
That's about,
suspect
yeah,
I
sorry.
suspect that was the reason. I'm not sure, because I haven't gone back to see what the enabling legislation at the time, what the thoughts behind it is, but I can suspect that is the case. Um, I don't have a big dog to fight in this one way or another. My attempt at the beginning was uh, to basically clean up language. So on the things that I have enforcing authority, it actually cleans up the language. There was some conflict with other state laws and zoning ordinances. I wanted to clean that one. Never in my mind I was thinking about weeds when I did this. I was going different direction. But now that it's come to the forefront, I, for me, if I have a defined term and I have, I can always find a way. I can find a way to determine what it is with the resources that may be available to me. Then I don't have a problem with that from the enforcement. I just don't want to go cut something that I shouldn't be cutting. And, that's why I think this particular thing about weeds, and I'm not trying to punt it. I appreciate the fact that some of you said you have contacted some people in code enforcement before, and they just didn't pay attention to it or whatever. You know, I can't make an excuse for that. All I can tell you is there is a new sheriff in town with regard to the property maintenance, the role of a property maintenance official. And, at the end of that, I'm a public servant, I serve those that have interest in building safety and property maintenance. So however that's going to shape, I will find a way to enforce it. I just don't know whether right now, with the information we have right now, I think it merits a larger conversation. I could, I can go either way. We can, from my perspective, we can define weed as long as I have resources to determine what they are, or we can take the weed out of the ordinance altogether, which makes me very happy, actually.
Yeah, so right now, it's not in your work plan and you're not resourced for it. And so any changes to the ordinance as it stands wouldn't be very helpful at the moment, right? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying it's not helpful. I'm just saying, when I put these amendments through, it was to make some technical changes to the ordinance. And I think what you guys want to do, it makes a lot of sense to me. I just don't think we are ready to make that final decision after 2 meetings, that I need to open that up to a larger group and have some community engagement around that one to make sure what it makes sense. Because frankly, I don't know enough about weeds and vegetations and trees to just say, okay, I'm going to go put it in. I don't know if anybody else has different ideas or solution to this. And Arlington Way, right? It's all about community engagement.
This is Jill. I just have an information question. David used the term landscape inspection. Is that a particular term that's associated with the section 7 or anything?
No.
No, I'm talking about when there's a site plan development. What's it called?
4.1?
Or I thought it was section 7 under the when there's a multi-use building and they are required, we come up with all the exceptions and then some of them have landscaping. And then somebody come along and inspect that to make sure they did whatever.
Yes, that one exists. That's part of a new development and a site plan condition. Probably Jennifer used to be in CPA. She probably knows more about it than I do. But we do have a couple landscape architects that actually make sure what was promised in the perception of that new building, that actually those folks are a signatory to a building permit before a building permit issued, and they're a signatory to issuance of certificate of occupancy. Make sure all those landscape features are actually in place.
Right. Well, those are the types of people that would know exactly whether it's a weed or not. So I'm not sure. It's just a comment, but it seems like the county does have the expertise in this. It's just a question of getting the departments lined up so that the resources can be deployed if they're needed.
To be very frank with you, You're right. I don't know what resources available, but between Department of Parks and Recreation and other folks that deal with it, I'm sure surely enough there is somebody or some bodies in Arlington that knows what about it. That is not my issue. That's the smaller of the issue. I just think that in order to amend it to deal with weeds, we need a larger involvement, a larger discussion that just me coming to a couple commission meeting and say, okay, we're going to change this. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I mean, but what about the work that Jennifer Fioretti is doing that we've all been working on for quite a long time, where we
Well,
are
that,
discussion
yeah,
about the ordinance.
And it has
I-
been public meetings. It has been raised many times.
We've been working on this for a long time. It just seems like
you know, I know the government and entities are different. I let Jennifer address that. I'm the building official and property maintenance official for the county. So I'm not aware of anything. So to the extent that I can be helpful is, you know, this particular ordinance that I'm in charge of enforcing. And then, you know, if you're going to put a definition for weed, and I said in last minute, I'm good with it. I just want to make sure we have a little bit of a community engagement around whatever that definition may be. That's all I'm asking for.
Is
I
it
think
possible to start getting this language together and starting to kind of define, set that community engagement process with a couple of open events where you bring the community in? And obviously, you're going to have some internal discussions about how you would enforce it and bring in the landscape architectures and the natural resources people that can say, this is what a natural landscape should look like. I mean, partly we're dealing with a definition that goes back to the 50s, 60s, where landscape was supposed to be a lot of lawn, a few trees, and a couple of shrubs.
correct.
And
I agree.
differently.
Yeah, you know, to be honest with you, and one of the things I'm going to admit, I don't know. Well, I know about community engagement. I really don't have a map on this particular issues. So I need to reach out to people like Jennifer, the other folks in CPHC to do that because
Yeah.
I come from an enforcement perspective, right? The laws that I enforce come from the state. The state adopts it. Virginia Maintenance Code state adopts it, and I am just to enforce it. So that community engagement about the laws and ordinances that I enforce happen in Richmond, you know, with the stakeholders. So this is a little bit different. And I think whatever needs to be, we have a lot of folks totally capable in the county that knows the process, who they should reach out to, who should be involved in this engagement to just define weeds. And if we start at that point, something else comes up, then that's, I guess, a fair game. Jennifer, any thoughts on that one? Help me out here.
I mean, that's your sort of, I recognize that's, there are many pieces that will go into amending the ordinance. So I hear you. And I do appreciate that you recognize that there are many stakeholders, DPR included, that would be part of that conversation. And so I defer to CPHD, to you
Yeah.
in ISD to determine and what would be appropriate as a next step. We are, DPR is a stakeholder, right? So we certainly want
Yeah.
to be part of that conversation.
Yeah, you know, we have our planning folks that do this community engagement every day. And, you know, I'm going to reach out to that because my part of it doesn't really much involve that. But certainly that's something. I think at the end of the day, what I want to say is if you're going to change the definition, and frankly, I don't see any harm done by that one to define and protect the vegetation we want to protect from code enforcement forcing somebody to cut it, right? We want to protect that. So I don't have fundamentally, I don't have a problem with that doing that. I just, however we define it, I think it needs to be a little bit broader than just me coming and meeting with some of the commissioners. I suspect there are other stakeholders that may want to voice their opinion on it. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I think we'd be happy to mobilize people voicing their opinion because they already have again and again and again. So I don't think we'll have any trouble with that because
Okay.
I think as Joan mentioned in the engagement process for the Forestry and Natural Resource Plan, this issue's come up repeatedly. So I think we've got lots of data already. You know, this feels like once again, we're dragging our feet. This seems like an easy one we could have ticked off. So I think it's super frustrating for those of us that have been working on this for years and years. You know, here we go again. And I think part of the frustration that I'm feeling, and I apologize for being, you know, a little on the soapbox on this, is that currently our county policies are really at odds with each other. And we promote natural landscaping. We, you know, used to have the stormwise water program. The county credit program for the utility fee is promoting conservation landscaping. I mean, again and again and again, the biophilic cities resolution. But we have to go back again, and we can't simply change the definition of a weed, or we don't even have a definition of a weed. There is no definition of a weed in the ordinance right now. It's just 12 inches. And I mean, to me, that's super frustrating. And, you know, how long is this going to take? And are we going to drag it on?
Well,
And it's super frustrating.
well, you know, you don't. So let me make this thing. You don't know me from Adam, right? He just knew me about 3 weeks ago. That's not how I do it. I am not a politician. I'm not a planner. I want clarity in every ordinance that I do from a practitioner in enforcement. So it's not the matter of me dragging my feet. And I said, my commitment to you guys is to put a group together to work on what that ultimate definition is. I also admitted that I don't know what I don't know. I don't know whether the definition you propose is the right definition. So I need to just bring a couple folks together. We collectively agree with it. Nobody asked me to change chapter 10. The county manager didn't ask me. I was just doing some house cleaning, decided that this needed attention. So I'm not punting everything to the future. This is not a political issue. I just want to make sure whatever definition we put in. And, you know, the other thing is, I don't change anything. I carry on with a broken language that I've had since 1950, certainly since 2007, for another 6 months to a year, until we come up with the definition.
No,
You know,
I think we
I
could
don't
get
think
this
we
done
should
in
do
6
that.
months.
I-
But I think, I don't want to have a problem if you're going ahead with that, you know, kind of very technical changes, as long as we've got a commitment that within 6 months, we can get this done in terms of addressing the weed ordinance.
I'm sorry, Joan, I have
Oh,
to disagree.
Okay.
I think that if you want to go forward with the changes to enforcement so that you have these citation authorities afresh, I think we need to take the weed part out of it, like you were saying, and just omit that for the time being until we figured it out. That's my opinion.
that I cannot do without a public hearing, because there are a lot of folks, you know, what I said in the last time, you know, a lot of folks rely on government to make sure the neighbors are keeping their property in shape. So taking the weed out of this equation, that is more major, in my humble opinion, than defining what a weed is.
Yeah, but you're asking us to go along with the plan where you're increasing the citation authority of your office, but we're not addressing the things for which the people would be cited. So
I
at
no,
a minimum, you know, we have to at least also put in some kind of an exception that if, you know, they're cited for a weed ordinance, there has to be, you know, some review by somebody else in the county or something.
well, I didn't say. I mean, at the end of it, it's not my decision to move it forward. So all your concerns that you have, I need to raise it to the county manager and see what direction he wants to go. Whether to advertise the same it is and then have objections to it because of the language of the weed, which wasn't part of this code change, or wants to hold it up until we come up with some language for the weed. At the same time, I guess to some degree, I've been dealing with this ordinance as is for the past 16 and a half years. I've been in Arlington County, so I can go on another couple years, but that doesn't help you either because weed is not defined.
Well,
See what
why
I-
don't we put in some kind of a temporary definition of weed and then we can work on it after, we can work on it and get the public engagement and then change it, so you can feel more comfortable. But I don't think it's a good idea to increase the authority of the office to provide citations against people, for the weeds that we haven't changed it.
Right.
So
you're
I
adding
mean,
commercial
I'm just
property.
pushing it back the other way. You
Just-
want us to wait, I'm saying, why don't you wait? Why don't you
Okay,
wait?
as I said, I can wait. I mean, if that's what but ultimately it's not my decision. As I mentioned before, I've waited 16 and a half years to make a change to it. So I can wait another 5 years or so, but at the end of it, it doesn't address your issue. So we move on. And if I get a weed, I have language in there currently because this doesn't affect weed. I have language in there to force somebody to cut the weed as it currently stands. The section that I changed had to do with some other stuff. It did put a civil citation for weeds rather than me going, because the language currently says I can actually go cut your lawn and put a lien on your property. That's the current language. So from my perspective, not from the county manager perspective, sure, I can wait another 5 years. But that doesn't by itself, me waiting, doesn't address your issue.
I could ask a couple of questions of fact, if you have information. How many reports do you get or complaints do you get about overgrown lawns in a year on average?
Are you ready for this answer?
Uh-huh.
I don't know.
Okay.
The reason I don't know, because I am dealing with a software that was put in place for Y2K. It's about 23 years old, and it doesn't differentiate between the different types of complaint. I can ask my staff anecdotally how many complaints they get, and it generally goes up. But if you want me to get some analytics from my software that distinguishes between a weed and a noise or, a building falling apart, I don't have that ability to give you that information. I just don't have it.
All right. Oh, thank you. So even without distinguishing, how many, since you currently have the authority to issue a citation for any violation, how many of those are done?
How many citations?
Uh-huh.
I'm not sure I can even give you that because citations we enter it in our system. So it's not on a spreadsheet. We put all the citation. So on an average, every year we do about 2,000 to 3,000 cases. In order to recognize which one has a citation on it, I have to open every 3,000 of them, single by single, see which one went to citation, which one didn't.
Okay.
And that's just as frustrating for me. We are actually working on a new system after 16 years. So the code enforcement is called Permit Arlington. The code enforcement module the complaint module has not been going in there, but sometimes at the end of this year, calendar year, we'll have the complaint system in there so we can actually run a report and run analytics, how much of this type of complaints we get, how much of that kind of, so we can differentiate what different complaints and how many of them end up in court or in lien and clean, as we call it. We clean it and then put a lien on property.
Okay, well, that would obviously, it would be a big help to you and
Oh, yeah.
and informative to everyone else. But if you have the changes that are that you're working on right now, independent of the question of the definition of a weed, one of the things that does is remove, if I understood you correctly a few minutes ago, that removes the automatic citation, right? You go-
No, it doesn't remove that. I have a choice to do a
Okay.
citation. Either way, I have to do a citation. So there are two paths that I will have for grass, for example. One is go the civil citation route. So come give you every day a civil citation for $50 or $100. Say, please cut it. Or I can go the clean and lean site. Either one of them is a citation, but the fines are different. One, I give you a monetary fine. The other one, I go cut the grass and bill you for several $1,000s and then put a lien on your property for that money we spent to have a contract to cut it.
And we've had people, I know, whether it was your tenure or not, I know there've been people that happened, and it were native plant gardens that got cut and then they got billed for it. So I know it's happened because we've heard the complaints.
I can assure you now that next time you're gonna ask somebody to do a cut, I'm gonna do a little bit of my due diligence to make sure this is not something that we are dealing with, a native plant. But again, I'm not trying to convince you one way or another. I was merely attempting to do some technical changes and give us some additional authority to deal with the condition of private property and to remove some of the conflicts. Now, I think the issue you brought up is very worthy of a conversation. But if you want me to wait, and it's not up to me, it's up to the county manager, I'm more than happy to wait another 16 years. But then I'll be retired anyway. But the issue will not go away by me waiting, right?
No, the issue will not go away by you waiting. Correct.
Sure.
So
So just a couple things I wanted to just highlight, because I know when we talked about this and we had a conversation with you, and we appreciate you taking the time a couple weeks ago as well, is that, as I said, we've been dealing with this issue at least since 2015, 2016, and had various conversations with people in the county. And meanwhile, a lot of the neighboring jurisdictions have changed their weed ordinance and have figured out a way to enforce that. So I'm just curious, have you checked in with any of your other colleagues in some of the neighboring jurisdictions? And,
no,
because as I sent you all those different weed ordinances that we have in the neighboring jurisdictions, how have they dealt with the enforcement issue?
I haven't checked with that. I do meet with the neighboring jurisdiction, but around building code application, we have a quarterly meeting, but not about weeds. So no, my fault because not too many building officials I think deal with weeds. So but I haven't reached out to that. That's part of the thing that we need to be doing if you're going to move this forward as a work group to find out what the standards everybody uses. What does Fairfax County do? What did Montgomery County do? What did Alexandria or Prince William County do? So that's going to be.
We have their examples of the language and how they did change. And I think, again, the reason why I'm so frustrated is because when we first started talking about this, we had talked about Arlington being the leader in this, and clearly we're a laggard and not a leader. And, we're sort of the last to this game. And that's what's so frustrating is how can
Well, I never claimed we are a leader in this. We just spoke 3 weeks ago. So probably somewhere else in the government you've talked about it. I don't know. I cannot change what it has happened. All I can say from a personal note, again, I don't make all the decision either. That's why, thank God. And that's why there are other people involved that are higher up than me. But from a personal perspective, I'm more than happy to open this conversation to larger group. My only hope is that I can get this technical correction done and then we can open up this conversation. That's my hope. You don't have to agree with it, you know, or you know, at the end of it, the county manager will makes a decision whether we move forward with this current status or we stop to gather some other information.
No, I appreciate that, you're not doing this in a vacuum. We totally get that. But this has been the sticking point where we're seeing progress in other areas in the county, and then we're not seeing it in code enforcement. So I guess that's the frustration, is how do we align all of the policies in the county?
See, until 3 weeks ago, I didn't know we had a problem in code enforcement. Okay, because the weed was weed. Until 3 weeks ago, when you guys brought it to my attention, I didn't know we had an issue. And I admittedly said, I don't know anything about weeds. I know about buildings. So when you said the county code enforcement hasn't dealt with that, I didn't think I had an issue to deal with. So I came across from this amendment from an ignorant point of view. I wanted to make some technical changes and remove some conflicting language with other laws and ordinances, some of them state, some of them local. So I came to this one totally ignorant. I didn't know this was an issue I needed to address.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, anyway, but a frustration from those of us who don't necessarily know what all the silos are within the county.
Duly noted. I totally understand.
Other questions? So Joan, your recommendation is to come up with a timetable, perhaps?
Yeah, I think if we could get a timetable of, within 6 months, that we can, because I don't think it's that difficult of a process to move. I think the biggest discussion would probably be, what's the process when somebody calls and complains about somebody's native plant garden because they think it's unruly and should be cut back, is what's the process the county's going to do to go and verify whether in fact the property's just not really being maintained and they're letting grass and everything grow up, or whether or not it's really a maintained natural landscape. Because that is the crux of the issue, is people complain, and without knowing what they're looking at, they come in and cut something down that has value. And now at the other hand is, there's a property around the corner from me that was completely overgrown with porcelainberry and English ivy, and they actually finally cut everything back not too long ago, but had a magnificent magnolia tree that you could almost not see.
Oh, wow.
So, but, and that's property was like that for ages.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
that should be the type of thing that meets, and it may not have met the weed ordinance because it was all low clinging invasive vines.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
and
still want
obviously,
the ordinance.
yeah, we still
We
want the
just want
ordinance.
the
Obviously,
different
we're not trying to undermine the health and safety of, the community. So we're just trying to fine tune it and figuring out what are the best next steps. So as you can, I think, tell from this group, we're not comfortable with just saying, yeah, go ahead, what you're going to do, and we'll take your word for it. And as well intended as we assume that is, but we, having been down this path many times before, I think we'd like a little more assurance that we've got a process in place and a timetable in place to get this done, because we're not going to be doing this forever either. And I know you do. So we're all looking for like an end game here. And
I obviously, without talking to the county manager, I did set up something with the deputy county manager for this Friday. That's the only time I could get. But I have a couple minutes to talk to the county manager tomorrow, and I can certainly bring your concerns to his and at the end of the day, he may decide. I don't know. To be honest with you, I don't know what he may decide. He may decide to move it forward and then tell the board no, that we are going to commit to studying this issue in 6 months. I just will tell him if I don't get a chance to talk to him tomorrow. I have a meeting set up specifically on this subject matter with the deputy county manager on Friday afternoon.
Okay, that's great. Would you mind then if either I would follow up with you or someone else and we can kind of just touch base and see where we are on this
Sure.
after you've had a chance to run the traps a little bit?
Sure, more than happy to.
Okay, well, I appreciate it. And we don't mean to blindside you on any of this, but as you can tell,
No,
I'm frustrated on this one.
yeah, sometimes, many times I go on construction jobs and people remind me to why I don't wear my hard hat, which I do eventually, but I say I don't need a hard hat. I have a hard head. So I take that to some of your commentaries, so I can take it.
Well, we appreciate your being with us tonight and taking the time. And we really do look forward to working with you to try to figure out. how to
Absolutely.
move this
Yeah.
along.
Your points duly noted from my perspective. It's just the timing of everything and how much we want to delay this one and, until we get to the next point. That's all.
Okay, well, thank you so much for being with us. Really appreciate it. Any other parting thoughts from Mr. Mary? Okay, great. Thank you. Really appreciate your.
Thank
your
you. My pleasure. Take care.
I mean, if they go forward with it, we just go in front of the county board when they have the discussion and say, because we're gonna have the county board support for this.
I did circle back both with Libby and Christian and Takis, just because we've been in contact with them to pull this item off the agenda. And so I just want to let them know where we were and that we were going to have this meeting tonight. So I will report back. Happy to copy you all on it as well and say that more work needs to be done. I think we certainly would like to know what the next steps are and,
Get a timetable on something that's under a year.
yeah.
I mean, it just isn't something that should take all that long. I mean, county.
No, it's not, but I agree with you about having a little discussion process.
Yeah.
Because as that last point was, that, we want to make sure that things that are ecologically healthy are not subject to prejudice and get whacked because they're 3 inches too tall. On the other hand, this could be a tool to start on the private property side, removing some things that shouldn't be there. And so fine tuning that definition, I think we'd want to look at some possibilities for things that are, regardless of the size and shape, that are not what we want in the county.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit of a more subtle point. It's not just saying all natives are good, but it's also saying, yeah, well, this ordinance could help us with some other things.
So, and Jen knows this too, that the Virginia Assembly did adopt language that would allow communities to, I've got it written right here somewhere, to restrict running bamboo, but there's no other ability to restrict invasive species on private property other than that. Am I correct on that? Unless it's a noxious weed.
There's the noxious weed list, and then there's like one random ordinance about Johnson grass.
Right, for
You know,
agriculture.
or something like
We're very
that.
limited what we can do on
But we-
invasive.
Is this
But
the
we
same
could position-
enforcement office that does the bamboo?
We don't have an ordinance.
Oh, it
Well,
would-
I mean, if we,
They
or
would be
other
the
noxious
same.
weeds,
If
That's,
they don't enforce noxious weeds.
who does that?
Noxious weeds is mostly like about the sale and transport and
Oh,
stuff like
oh,
that of
okay.
noxious weeds.
yeah.
And this would be the state, I
Okay,
suppose.
so,
That's
But they
separate
would
stuff.
do, if there was a local ordinance,
okay.
then they would enforce that.
So like
Yeah.
if Fairfax and Manassas have adopted a running bamboo ordinance, if we were to do that, then they would be the ones to
This
enforce.
office.
This office. would be
Okay.
the ones
Yeah,
enforcing it.
which, that's why I raised the question about the scope of work and
Mhm.
the resources,
Mhm.
because if this were going where I think it should go, that has some implications for how that whole function is defined,
I mean, maybe if we could do,
so-called landscape.
update the weed ordinance and put in the bamboo ordinance, as long as we don't put too many things on this that it drags it down and takes it too
Well,
long.
that's my fear. And the other thing
So
too,
I-
I think
you
we've
know.
got to get it off county property too, right?
One of the issues that I look at with the bamboo ordinance, well, I'm generally like, oh, I've definitely been looking at it and looking at other jurisdictions that do it, is that we do have a fair amount of bamboo on county property. And in some cases, it is spilling over
Oh,
onto
gosh.
private property. I actually just was talking to somebody about it today, where we're, you know, going in to clean it up. And just, I think we would want to take some time to, like, how much bamboo have we got? What resources would it take to get it off our side? Just so that we don't have everybody turn right around and be like, well, it's all your bamboo, you know, we want our house to be in order.
Right.
Or at least
Well,
be
and-
prepared to clean our house. We don't have to have it perfectly clean, but we have to be,
Be able
we have to know that we're gonna have to hire 4 maids or whatever it is, so. I would be a little leery of conflating too many
Especially,
things.
yeah, because you saw the hesitation,
Yeah.
even on doing this. And what we had proposed was either doing what the North Virginia Regional Commission had adopted, which, you know, 2 of our county board members were part of that too, or just going in and changing the definition of weed, so that it, you know, and we sent them lots of examples of what other jurisdictions had done, what the Northern Virginia Regional Commission had recommended. So there's lots of language out there, but, you know, we're not there. Anyway, Jen, be ready. Sorry, I see your hand up. Sorry to.
Oh, yeah, thank you, thank you. And I would just add, from what Jen Souls had shared, there's also, as we sort of take a deeper look into the running bamboo ordinance and how we want to sort of have this discussion, one of the big things that weighs on my mind is the equity piece of this. I mean, there's some fairly steep fines that are associated with steep, you know, relatively speaking, you know, associated with being able to implement this type of ordinance, and the cost alone to manage it on private property is also something that we just need to consider, and how that will impact those folks who don't necessarily have the money to manage it. And so I think it absolutely warrants a fulsome conversation about how we would implement something that is considers those challenges.
Yeah, no, I think that's really well taken. And again, we've been trying to do this little thing for so long that I feel like, you know, we need to stay focused, see if we can just get this so that people can have managed natural landscapes. That's what the goal is. So let's start with that, see what we can do. You know, I guess I'm a little frustrated because I do feel like we've already had a whole lot of public outreach on this issue, not, you know, specifically just on a different definition, but we've heard it again and again and again. So you know, what else do we have to do to kind of check that box? But anyway, editorial comment here.
I don't know how possible it would be to crunch the fun wrap engagement data. Like, I shouldn't say that. I don't even know how possible it would be
To see how many comments
to
came in
mine
on
that data. I don't want to put
Yeah, do a
anything else
search
on
across the-
their plate.
Even just doing a search across the comments to see how many people mentioned weed ordinance. So I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure I included it at some point.
I think the
And I
Eco
think we
Action
did
put
in
it
our
in our
letters.
letter.
Yeah,
It might be in the public data. I know they put a lot of the fun wrap engagement
yeah.
data
So
up
we can
online.
take a look at that. as
Well,
a- as a
that's worth
talking
looking
point.
at. It could be under reporting though, because if it's not something that was prompted, you might not get responses from people who certainly would support it, but just didn't
Yeah.
think
No,
to
the
say it.
people that, like, us people that
Yeah.
know, we
Yeah.
probably specifically said, need a weed ordinance.
Yeah, we know it's in there. We know it's in there, so
We
there's.
can say how many times we mentioned
Yeah,
it.
we can at least count that. But it's, you know, somewhat ironic too, because I was just contacted by 2 people that had gotten enforcement. They've got native plant gardens and somebody called them and, you know, so they're in the midst of all of this. And then when are we gonna get this fixed? When are we gonna do this?
Okay,
It's
I
like,
think
write your county board is all
Yeah.
I can say.
at a minimum, we have to, you know, if you, what I'm trying.
The next meetings, for our next meetings, we may all.
One sentence, okay. There's momentum on their side, they want to do something, but we can't allow that to go forward unless we have something that we want that goes through. Otherwise, we're gonna never get anywhere.
As he said, we can wait 16 years until he retires.
Yeah.
Or, you know, 5 years or
So
something.
that's only, that's the only thing I was really concerned.
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, we've
Yeah.
got something to hold over them.
Well, they
but-
want something, so we
Yeah,
have
but
momentum.
we've got to get a firm commitment that they're going to do something and it's going to be in a timeline that, you know, matches what we're looking at. Because this isn't all that difficult in terms of actually doing it. More of a challenge of getting the inspectors to understand or at least know who to call when they have a question
Yeah,
about
but-
whether or not this is overgrown
But-
property or native landscaping.
But if we're kind of negotiating some kind of an understanding with him,
Yeah.
that, we're gonna let this go forward while we're working on a weed ordinance, then we have to have a similar understanding from our side that they're not going to go after people who have legitimate native plant gardens. There has to be that mutual understanding. Otherwise, I just,
Well, and
I
I
was
get,
wondering if there could be a informal appeal process for
exactly,
these kinds of
Yeah.
cases.
go to
rather
the
than-
section 7
Rather than
guys.
an automatic,
yeah,
rather than an automatic citation.
right.
Or even if you do get a citation, you can
They should
appeal
be able
it.
to appeal it, yeah.
Right.
And then they should bring in the people that know what they're looking at and
Right.
say, yeah, no, you should get a citation. That's a good landscape.
That's why I think just eliminating the whole thing about the weed at all is, better than something,
Well, right now it's only grass or, I mean, the language is so simple. It makes, that's the problem, is it's too simple. It is, sorry, I have it here somewhere. Grass or lawn area, I'm sorry, this thing keeps wanting to do it. Grass or lawn area exceeds 12 inches in height. That's it. So anything
So,
over 12 inches in
What if you
height.
have
Okay.
azalea bushes? They have azalea.
It's not grass or
Well,
lawn
if you
area.
have planted areas with native plants, that's not a grass or lawn area. That's a
Well, that's
planted area.
what the other jurisdictions have done. They've made a very, easy distinction.
Mhm.
Alexandra is easy. It's, the word weeds is used in this chapter shall be held to include grass, weeds, bushes, or any other vegetation other than trees, ornamental shrubbery, flowers, and garden vegetables properly tended. So, they've taken an easy way out, and they have a whole lot of cultural landscaping in
Mhm.
Alexandria. If they can do it, why have we not done it?
Yeah.
I mean, Prince William County's done it.
Yeah.
Herndon's got an awesome definition. So we've got examples, we've got all these neighboring jurisdictions that have figured it out. Why can't we figure it
Grass and
out?
lawn, the definition of a weed
That's what the Northern Virginia Regional
There's no
Commission
is
reason
a
focuses
to-
on.
separate,
Yeah.
so ours doesn't even say that. All it says is
12 inches.
grass or lawn over 12 inches. Well, all this other stuff is not grass or lawn.
Yeah, see, I
So
think,
how can it even apply?
Because it's only
Exactly.
12 inches is the standard. That's it.
But if it's not grass or lawn, 12 inches is irrelevant.
Well, but if you haven't defined your terms, they can say whatever they
And they
want.
can also not, administratively, they can just not.
Well, and what happened
that's
last
what I'm
time?
trying to say. If,
Yeah.
the police don't enforce every single law against every single person every time they see it.
Yeah,
There has to be discretion. And so we need an agreement, from the top administrator that they're not going to go after.
well, what happened
Yeah.
last time when several people got turned in for their native plant garden and they came out and they called the ombudsman and they went out and looked at it and, so then they stopped enforcing much, but I think then they had other issues with people saying, just letting the grass go and saying that's, I'm
Yeah,
done. So,
no, and some people will do that
yeah.
Yeah.
And
So I get it, we need to have a process, but these other jurisdictions have figured it out. Why can't we
Yeah.
do it?
Well,
That's where I keep going.
He could call us and ask us if he wants to know if it's a native plant
That's what
garden.
I said. We've got
Or-
resources.
I
We've
mean,
got lots of
he
resources.
still has discretion and it's not rocket science.
Right, and there's a whole lot of people that know the difference.
There's a thing called iNaturalist.
Yeah. Maybe that's what it is. It could ID some of this stuff and see what's on. Actually, that's not a bad idea. There's some good AI technology. We can. Anyway,
Anyway.
thank you all. I appreciate your.
Yeah.
Hey, sorry for my outbursts. I just can't help myself.
I'm sorry for mine.
No, that's okay.
Anyway, it's just like beating our head against a wall.
But I think, keep in mind, we have the county board's attention on this, and we need to keep it to make sure that we get action.
Right, and so, anyway, the next.
And I think Taka even said something about, people have complained about, my native plants. So we
Okay.
did.
Well,
About his own native plant?
Yeah.
Well, I
don't
don't know,
know.
we're gonna, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, just people, if it's not grass and very highly pruned shrubs in a tree, that's not right.
Yeah,
And hell, it might bring in bees.
right, other pollinators. All right, Jen, you wanna give us a staff update?
All right, I've got 2 staff updates. I'm acting for Ryan in his capacity with the Forestry and Natural Resource Plan. Basically, I don't think too much has changed since last month. They've gotten all the feedback from the engagement after the Forestry and Natural Resource Plan that's been posted online. I know some of you have seen that. I've seen some comments. And then the staff is currently editing the text based on all that feedback, and then also developing the graphics and the layout. Like, this is going to be a prettier version. We're going to move closer to like the final draft. And so that editing process is basically continuing, and hopefully we'll be bringing that final draft out late spring, early summer, depending on where you break the seasons, and then bring it forward for adoption in the 4th quarter. So
Fourth quarter now.
4th quarter.
Okay. That's what
And
is
this
it?
includes county board briefings, LRPC meetings, and other commission reviews.
Okey doke. Any questions for Jen?
That I can relay to Ryan, or Jen also is still here, though Jen may know.
So let's
But,
say, do we get a weed ordinance first, or do we have to plan first?
Well, I mean, that
Taking any
argues again,
bets.
if we're talking 4th quarter for a final, we need to get on this weed ordinance. A
Yeah,
whole other
Yeah.
growing season.
Yeah.
Because then we're talking about another year before we would get anything done.
Yeah.
Anyway. All right.
and then the other stuff update I have on behalf of Alonzo is basically let you guys, I don't think there's any other staff update beyond where we are with the deer plan, the deer management assessment. I believe all of you saw the presentation he did either with Forestry and Natural Resource or with Parks and Rec.
But Joan would.
I haven't seen
I
it.
do have it if you'd like to see it. I'll maybe go through it briefly since.
Yeah, because you've not seen it, Marianne, either.
Yeah, no, that's why I came.
I guess we better see it then.
All right. Let me wait. I'm not sharing.
I've seen this twice.
Some of you may have seen this, twice now. Let me share my screen. Okay. So, Jen, I'll assume you can see this. Everybody else is here in the room. Jumped. A lot of this information, if you've been part of other things you've seen before, basically that the deer are an important part of our wildlife, that the population is very, very low by the 30s, but we now have far more deer than we have historically had. And that basically these were first sort of noted as a concern in the Wildlife of Arlington inventory, the technical report that we did back in 2011. Arlington had a deer panel with regional deer experts in 2012 to look at deer in Arlington and where the population was and what impacts we might see if we had too many deer. We hired Stuart Green in 2021 to do the drone survey, and I think everybody's familiar with that. So I'm going through this very quickly, but I know, even if you haven't seen this, you've had a lot of this information before. And then in August, we hired White Buffalo. And with White Buffalo, you can't quite see it just because of where the, can't seem to. Okay. We hired them to do basically something in 3 phases. So the first phase, they have almost concluded. The first phase consisted of doing a vegetation impact survey, benchmarking with what other local jurisdictions are doing, and a review of scientific literature on deer and deer impacts, especially focusing on similar habitats and ecosystems. So that is, I would say, getting very close to wrapping up phase 1, which was looking at those things. And that report, once it comes out, will be posted on the county deer page. And we're also going to make a project page as well as a web page, just to, sort of a project. And we're about to begin phase 2, which I'll get into in a little more detail. But basically, again, as you may be aware, there are some potential problems if we do have deer numbers, over the ecological carrying capacity that they can support. You know, for us in natural resources, we are stewards of our natural lands, and we've been charged to be stewards of all the resources on those lands. So that's really what's driving what we're doing. You know, the main concern is basically that the forests themselves may be failing to regenerate. The native plants for wildlife may be impacted, even if we still have the canopy trees. And that would impact other wildlife, insects, ground nesting birds. The lack of native vegetation can increase the chances of invasive vegetation spreading. And then also at some point, you know, we can have, if we have an unhealthy forest and forest ecosystem, it is also possible if the populations get large enough to impact the deer themselves, which is obviously something we would want to avoid. Other jurisdictions and other issues that are sometimes, you know, brought up, less of a focus for us in parks, are deer vehicle collisions, damage to landscape areas, tick-borne illnesses. This is, so as I said, we started finishing up phase 1, which was doing these vegetation surveys. They've written a draft of all that, and they're in the process of doing the final draft, and I expect that to come out within the next couple weeks. And then we're going to do our public engagement, which is sort of phase 2, basically sharing the report, the result, what we found, the implications of what we found, and then, you know, what management actions might be possible given what we found. Like, okay, if we find that we have too many deer and they are negatively impacting the forest, what are the management options that are possible, and especially which ones are most feasible within Arlington County. There's many options, but not all are feasible. And then sharing that information with the public, getting feedback on both what we found and on the management options that are available. And then that sort of phase 2 is those public engagements. We're looking at possibly doing some pop-ups, possibly doing a survey, meeting with focus groups. All this is it's in the process of being nailed down. So this is sort of our draft. I think it was announced at other previous meetings, but this is basically where we are. You know, we had hoped to be doing, I think if you were at the first commission meetings, we hoped to be doing our focus groups in February. We are kind of at max capacity with our engagement stuff right now. And we also just want to make sure, I think, that this whole community engagement is really well thought out and really well done, because this is our chance. This is the time we're going to be going to the public and getting feedback on what we're going to do. And we need to make sure that we're doing the best job of that, so we don't have to face these issues down the road. And yeah, just, you know, staff capacity. So we were hoping to begin the community engagement by February. It is February. We're still nailing our process down, I would say, but that's where we are. So it is a pushback from, I know you guys are going to be frustrated because this is what we do. This is what we do. This is once again the county failing to move as fast as you would like. But we've had some staff loss in our offices. Not in our office this time, but in the engagement office. We had some staff loss there. And just trying to make sure we don't max this out and we get it done right.
So Carolyn, can I ask a question?
I am going to allow you to ask a question.
So public engagement is vital on this issue for sure. And that's one reason Armin has had this educational thing. So I would ask, if possible, as you prepare for public engagement, I think it might be useful for you to have whoever's doing that hear what Armin has done and hear the kind of public dialogue we've had, because that could give you a sense of what kind of questions people are going to have, you know, coming out. And for example, I would suggest that it's really important to share the data that's been collected and then have public education based on data, rather than starting like a thinking survey, which may be based on not really having thought about things. That would just be one example of, I think, the feedback or the type of discussion we'd like to have. So I think if it's possible, however you want to structure it, if Armin could engage directly, or if Armin goes through a commission, or whatever, procedurally makes sense. But this is very, very important.
I think it would be useful as you're doing the public engagement is to kind of give a good description of what the natural role of deer is within the environment, because I think too many people jump to, we just want to get rid of all of the deer. And then that creates, people don't like that option. But in terms of, what do you need? And because the other part of that is how do you expand the habitat that deer can cohabitate? Now, they're not going to have the natural predators, which is something that is always going to have to be looming there, is we're essentially going to have to be their natural predators, because we're not going to bring wolves back into the area, I don't think. Got occasional bear, but.
Right, they're not gonna do much.
I've heard that,
Feasible and less feasible.
I've heard that mountain
Yes,
lion-
right,
mountain lions are moving.
So it just, kind of, so it's not just we want to get rid of the deer because people don't like them nibbling on their hydrangeas.
Yeah.
Right.
Deer are a natural part of the environment, but this is how healthy they are. I don't know, there may be some things that kind of talk about is what the indigenous, because they think the indigenous populations probably managed the deer populations as well. I don't know how much knowledge
And
there
there's,
is.
you had it in your slide too, the carrying capacity, because
Yeah.
there's ecological
Yeah.
carrying, and it's, for people that aren't used to talking
Yeah.
about that, it takes a little bit of explanation,
Yeah.
so. I
Well,
appreciate
another
The
it.
thing
indigenous
is-
the indigenous
Yeah.
populations that help. And also, of course, aside from the small areas that they cleared for farming, it was all,
Right. Oh, yeah, they had large,
open.
they had, but they managed many of those natural areas.
Yeah.
And in some cases, they managed them probably to have some deer around so that they had meat when they needed it.
Oh,
Which-
well,
which
there's
we
that
can kind
too,
of-
yeah.
Right,
But it would also be very interesting and educational to show if it's true, because it seems intuitively that it's true, that there's a big correlation between the increase in invasive plants and the increase in the deer population. And just, keep hammering on like the ecosystem in the forest is
Yeah.
gonna be a monoculture if we don't deal
Yeah.
with it.
Well, even, when we've taken, walks in some of the parks, and it's, oh yeah, you're seeing a lot more pawpaws, you're seeing a lot more of, what's the other ones that, spice bush, because the deer don't eat it, so you're getting bigger populations there. So,
One common comment we had from a lot of our engagement with civic groups, for example, was, gee, I am seeing a lot more deer than I saw several years ago. I know they're eating my vegetable garden. I didn't realize they were a threat to our forests.
Yeah, a lot of people.
Now that you've told me that, I am concerned. So that's why I think that if just what you're saying, the ecological role of deer, they are part of the ecology. We want to keep deer. It's just a question of, we have to, in my opinion, we have to exercise a balancing act. But I think people generally, when they have a chance to be exposed to that information, they will understand that action is needed. So, but it really is important how this is done. And that's why I'm expressing a concern to make sure that you have an opportunity, or that you take advantage of some of the learning that we've gone through over the last 3 years and incorporate that in the plans.
Yeah, and that
Because there is a lot of lessons learned
Mhm.
from that.
And that is part of why, you'll see, the arrow goes both ways on that community engagement. Part of what we are planning to do is have these sort of, here's what we found, here's what this means, sharing of the information about deer before we start collecting people's feelings on, here's what we found, here's what that means, here's some things we might do about it. But we don't want to just be like, here's some things we might do about it.
Right, and just get a
We need
reaction.
to be like, here's what we found,
Right. We're available to share our experience.
just to follow on what Mary's saying. The logic sequence for people who haven't heard much about this at all, I think works best when you start with ecology. And it starts with the natural rules and the natural balance. And then you go to the losses when there's not balance. Then you go to the data about Arlington. So when you hear the numbers, you already know what that means. You start with the numbers,
Right, it
don't
doesn't
really
have
know.
Has no context.
and
Yeah,
there's no
no
context
context,
to understand what that means. And you don't have a basis for figuring out for yourself. Okay, so if we're gonna, how much does it matter? If you're gonna do something about it, what kinds of things would you do?
Mhm.
So I mean, it's really like a mini course
Mhm.
in urbanitology.
Yeah.
And then how's our circumstance measure up to the desirable?
Yeah,
circumstance?
which is, I think, your point. That's what the feedback that we've been hearing.
And that exactly is the flow of the presentation we've been giving to all these groups. It's exactly that. Here's what the natural situation was and should be, and here's how all the different types of critters benefit when things are in balance. And now here's what's happened, and here's the result of that, and that's why we have these decisions to make. And people do step through that. And so anyway,
Thanks, I know you
Yeah.
spent a lot of time on this. so
spent a lot of time on this.
Yes.
And I think probably important to kind of stress somewhere is that, you know, we don't live in a natural landscape. It's all going to be
Right.
human designed to some extent. So, you know, we're part of this now, so we have to kind of learn our lessons from nature, but we're going to have to intervene.
And we've created the perfect habitat because it's all edge habitat that deer love. And this is what we've created here, so, yeah.
Thousands of miles of edge.
Thousands of miles of edge, yes. All right, any other questions for Jen?
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, we can go ahead and do our quick updates from everybody. You want me to go first? I can do forestry and natural because I just pulled up the agenda. Sorry.
Good, because I was like not completely conscious when I
Yeah,
was
so
thinking.
we did have the update on the deer assessment, and Ryan gave us an update on the forestry and natural resource plan timeline, which is why fourth quarter strikes me as, for some reason I thought.
At least that's what I, like, he's on off on vacation or something like
Yeah.
that today, so he just
Okay.
typed this up, he may have just.
If he hadn't been on vacation, it'd be the third quarter, but
But now it's.
He took that one day off and we had to push the plan
fourth
back
quarter.
from
It's his
spring
fault.
to,
Okay.
you know, April 21st, April 22nd, or whatever it was that triggered the quarter shift.
Right. Vincent gave a really interesting presentation on recommended tree lists, and I think it was some of the things that we've been talking about with missing middle is keying the recommendations onto those tree lists, but there were actually more than just the ornamental trees and the shade trees. So it was very interesting the way they've sliced and diced them. So there's a ton of information on the website about trees that I'm sure you all have looked at too for some of the tree canopy stuff too. We got a report on the nature centers and the sort of numbers of participants and the fact that the hours have been cut back, you know, and the impact of the visitors on that, which is significant. And that, you know, post-COVID, which I think you all are aware of that, the decision was made that it makes sense from a safety thing that you shouldn't have one staff person in a nature center by themselves. And that, so there always are going to be two now, but that's really made an issue as far as the ability of the nature centers to stay open for the hours, because they're only 3 days a week, is that right?
I can't believe I don't know this.
Yeah, anyway, I think
3 and
it's
3.
3 and 3.
Right.
One each for the weekend
both
days.
open
the weekend
Saturday.
days. So Monday off, Tuesday, Thursday, Wednesday, Friday,
Saturday.
Saturday.
But you have
Sunday.
to look every time because you can't just drop in anymore.
No,
And so anyway, they are doing additional work in this. I guess every first grader is getting a program, which they've been doing. But now when the days off, since they're not open very much, the staff is going out and doing that. But we did sort of look at the numbers and ask for more information about what would it cost to actually increase staff so that the nature centers could be open more. And, you know, it's like a rounding error. It's just not that much because you're just talking about staff salaries.
Especially
Because the building's
considering,
already there, you know, they already have the cost of the building.
yeah, especially considering that the number of people counted going in was cut in half.
It were more because people are so confused about when it's open and when
Yeah.
it's not. So people used to wander in regularly and now they're not because
Yeah.
they have no idea when it's open.
And there's also no information about who those people are from
Right.
age, gender, residence, any other demographic stuff, which would be good to know too.
Yeah. So anyway, I think from a, budget issue, that came up as, in drafting a budget letter, that one of the recommendations would likely be to increase nature center hours and get the staff back up again. Especially as we're talking about, the forestry and natural resource plan, education's a huge piece of that. Nature centers play a really big role in that. So
Yeah.
anyway, it seems a shame not to be using those more effectively. And then we also did a couple letters. I sent out the stormwater utility letter. There was also a letter on Nova Parks. Did you see that, Jill?
I didn't see it, and I didn't see your stormwater letter until today.
Okay, so I will,
What did the letter?
Nova Parks was basically just saying Paul Gilbert had come and done a presentation and focused on the partnerships with you and others, and Armin, and just
And the new strategic plan.
the new strategic plan, the fact that they are putting some money into invasive species, which they haven't done much.
Yeah, but what
of.
did your letter say?
So generally be supported. I'll send it out.
Oh, okay.
Just supporting that new direction of
Oh,
Nova Parks,
okay.
and then it's not all about the, how many dollars can you bring in from each activity or water.
And you already sent it.
Yes,
Okay. Okay.
yeah, so we'll send that out as well.
Okay.
And I think that was it for those. Did you all, what were you doing, Joan and Suju?
Let's see, well, much of our last meeting was involved with the county's plan, or actually non-plan, to electrify the ARC bus system. So that's engaging a lot of my time right at the moment. We did approve our priorities for 2023, and it climate change, top level themes are climate change, equity, and resiliency. But under that, especially specifically within resiliency, it's stormwater management, including use of nature-based solutions where feasible and relevant for management, and then also just the protection and expansion and improvement of natural areas, as well as, of course, equity and access to those areas.
Could you send
Are those
us?
in a report or letter
A
to
letter.
the board or anything? Like
It was sent to the board. It should also be up on our website now.
Okay, great.
So those are up. Approved a letter on the Arlington Career Center. Again, not a nature-based issue, but more that they want to put gas boilers in a school that actually is training kids for the jobs of the future. And then the final issue kind of raises, we actually have, right now we have 5 vacancies or coming vacancies on the commission. 2 of them will be filled with this next coming board, but I really, if anybody has any thoughts or ideas, especially always the challenge of getting diversity in our, with people at least have some background and knowledge on some elements of climate change, environment. So kind of welcome that. And specifically for Energag, Sean Norton is one of the ones going off the commission. So I will find a third person to be part of the Energag on that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Wow, that's a lot. I know. Always, that was the frustrating thing with my chair. Just like, you always got these openings.
Yeah, I know.
Just when you feel like you're.
Seems a little.
Yeah.
Why do people keep going to Alexandria? Or Fairfax or whatever.
Jill.
Yeah. I forgot I was supposed to give this report, so I'm sorry. I'm speaking kind of extemporaneously, but we had a session where Takas came and talked to us about a lot of things. I have 2 pages of notes on that, so I won't repeat it all. And we had a presentation about security and policing in the park, especially having to do with equity. And we learned some things that were pretty interesting. And our parks, the bottom line is our parks are very safe. And they do a good, they tried out hard not to express bias in their enforcement. And then we had the same presentation that we just had on the deer. And then we assigned people to the different development plan meetings. And then we talked about the Bill Thomas Award. There's going to be an in-person celebration, we hope, for that.
And that deadline's already come and gone.
No, it's just starting. The whole process is just starting.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you have anybody in mind, send I think I'm going to be on that, if I recall. So send us your nominees. And we have 3 open seats, but I think those are all going to be filled. And we had at least 2 letters that I recall. One was a report to the county on last year, and the other one was the plan for the coming year. And there's not a huge amount of difference. One thing we're doing next month is having a joint meeting with the Recreation Commission.
Sports.
The Sports Commission,
Uh-huh.
sorry. And a big thing we talked about with Takis was the Marymount situation. He was very well versed on it, and there's 3 moving parts. So we may well request a meeting with apparently Marymount has a new liaison that's doing a better job of explaining their situation.
Yeah, wow, that was, but just it's in Earl now, and here's our full
Yeah.
plan that we haven't told the county about.
Right.
Yeah.
What do they
The
do?
full blind side, yeah.
They wanted to.
Well, there's 3 parts to it all, and and there's nothing before the county at the moment.
They
so
wanted to
there's
take
really-
some parcels and make them Marymount parcels and county parcels of land.
Oh, the one.
But they want to give a park in exchange. Okay, so
I think I
it's,
did see that.
it's
That was a
not,
couple of
you
months
know,
ago,
my
and it-
neighborhood is Donaldson Run, and all this is happening in Donaldson Run. And
Oh,
there's a
I'm
lot of
sorry.
hand flapping about it, but
So
there's
the-
really nothing, you know.
Nothing
Was
else.
Takis, I assume Takis was aware, and that some of you were aware, 3 years ago, there was a whole 10-week process of meeting every week called the Dominion and 26th Street
I think I recall something
Working
about
group,
that.
yeah.
working group,
And that-
task force,
It failed
actually.
to actually come up with something, did it?
No, that's a complete report.
But I mean, the
Nobody's-
recommendation was not to go
Well, the
forward.
recommendation was that all the proposals were preposterous.
Okay, that's what I was trying to say. There
And-
wasn't anything to
But
do.
it wasn't just about, the reason I pointed out is because that wasn't just about Marymount. Because DES wanted to also use where the salt storage is,
Yeah,
right along there.
yeah,
They wanted to expand that to have half of all the vehicles for salt removal and other things located there with buildings to service the employees, so they wouldn't have to drive back to here so frequently, and it would be more efficient, and also to have it better organized for the mulch pickup and delivery. So there were a number of moving parts, and that's part of what made it so complicated and difficult. But the Marymount part was they wanted a full NCAA size soccer field with stadiums around it, which would have taken up almost all the park. And the only way you could have a design that did both is to have all the DES stuff underground and put the other thing on
Wow.
top. Well, almost, not, I'm exaggerating a little bit, and put the other thing on top. And so then you're looking at
a lot
you
of
know,
things.
$60 million to,
And think of
Well-
the parking and traffic issues on that one.
Well, and I don't claim to understand it all, but there's also having something to do with Quincy Park and their use of that for soccer, as well as Long Bridge Park and their use of that for lacrosse.
well, they already use Long Bridge
I know,
for soccer.
but all of these things are
Related.
in the
Yeah, okay.
mixture of things that have to be
Gotcha.
worked on.
I'll rest my
Yeah.
case. I'm not
That's
sure
right.
I want to go there.
I don't think there's anything to do right
Yeah,
now.
right,
So,
yeah.
To be aware of it, yeah.
so
Okay.
I think that's enough for me.
Okay.
Yeah, and we will do a letter on the stormwater utility this month.
Okay, good. So,
probably,
did
and
I
we've
send
got-
that? I did
Yeah,
send
You
that.
you
said
did.
it
Sorry.
today. That was a
Yeah.
really good point.
Yeah.
I would like to make a comment about that from the perspective of my trying to sell free trees
Mhm.
to some of these religious institutions that didn't want to accept them until the incentives for the stormwater utility was in place. And I didn't, in my mind, make the connection to cutting down trees as the next logical step. So thank you for pointing that out because
Well, and we had talked
so
about grandfathering, both conservation landscaping and
Yeah.
trees. And, you know, one of the things I was talking to David earlier about this too, is that I get it, that it's not a huge financial incentive. It might be for the churches, especially because they've got a lot of
their parking lot.
and, you know, how do you incentivize that? So I think the financial incentives do make a big difference too. But on, you know, individual properties, it goes back to the same thing in the weed ordinance too, that we're trying to encourage this type of behavior on
Yeah.
conservation, landscaping, and tree canopy.
Yeah.
And we need to be consistent with our
Yeah.
policies, you know, of,
Absolutely.
Well, I think, you know, they
Yeah,
need to
absolutely.
bake in tree canopy as part of the initial, either as part of the initial assessment of how you kind of interpret pervious versus impervious surface, or at least bake it into a fairly significant credit that's tied to the percentage of tree canopy coverage that you have. I
And
mean,
there are
it's,
other,
it's fine, give them $10 for planting a tree, but, you know, they can plant a tree every year and it can die.
yeah, exactly. You know.
right, so it's preserving a
Mhm.
mature tree, there ought to be some kind of incentive
Yeah.
to that. So anyway, it's complicated. Other
Yeah.
jurisdictions have done more interesting things. The thing I sent around about Jacksonville and the
Oh, I didn't
kind
read
of
that,
artificial
yeah.
intelligence,
Well,
that
yeah.
they've been able to get that granular analysis of it. So, you know, how can we be
Yeah,
more
well, they
creative
should
in
be
using the
able to, I
data?
mean, that's how they're doing all tree canopy studies now, is get the aerial view, and that's how they're gonna do impervious surface, so there should be, I mean, you know, they might have to phase it in over 2 or 3 years because just to get the methodology right, but, you know, that's something that should be automatic.
Something else I want to just plant the seed too on, when we talk about lot coverage and sort of following up on our meeting from last
Oh, yeah,
month
that's a good
with
meeting.
Susan. Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. She offered to answer questions or come back and whatever we might want on that. But there's a huge amount of things on a property that are not counted as impervious surfaces, like walkways and, you know, anything under, I mean, it's very bizarre what those are. And I think at some point that's a big deal. You know, people are building these additions and then they build the big patios. Well, the patios don't count because they're on ground level, but they're in an impervious surface.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that's definitely impacting.
Oh, no, no.
Well, that's
Well, I
why,
can have 4 contiguous neighbors testify that what happened when the neighbor increased the patio size.
Yeah. It's coming right into their, yeah.
Oh, it tunneled, it was a mess.
that's what was impressive to me about the Jacksonville article is that, you know, not only is it 3D, but with the AI supplementation, they can distinguish 20 different kinds of surfaces, including swimming pool water from stream
pond or
water or
something.
pond
Wow.
water. And I mean, you don't have to understand how all of that exactly works to go from the things we've discussed in the past year to the letter to that economies of scale would tell you there are about a dozen things that the county could do with this kind of information across a number of departments. And if you can justify it because the core purpose is the utility fee calculation and doing it as accurately as possible so it gives the maximum cause effect demonstration to residents, then it's justifiable as part of the administrative cost for that, and all the other purposes benefit from that. Or they can amortize it or whatever if they want to. They can do cost sharing, but the whole point is if you're going to do it and it's this sophisticated, you get a lot of bang for the buck for doing that. And that's what we ought to be doing with everything from tree canopy to, you know, to even light shadows. You know, there's just so many things you can do.
Yeah. So anyway, more to follow on that, but just thought it was interesting discussion that's sort of headed in that direction too.
I'll be further than that.
Is there any new business from anyone?
No, just the same old business. all
It's
the
the
time.
same old
Yeah. Hey, why don't we-
I feel like it's a saying that it's just like, oh my God, how long do we have to do this?
why don't we think about looking at the weed ordinance?
Yeah, let's do one more time.
Hey, good idea.
Yeah. Anyway.
No, Groundhog Day was
You have
last
your own-
week.
I do. I feel like Groundhog Day. That's exactly it. How many times do we have to do this?
Sorry.
Okay, I think that we will adjourn. But anyway, thank you all. It's always good to see you in person. What a treat.
Really
And thank
good.
you for being here and
And I'm going to stop recording.
Oh, God.
Oh, I thought you stopped a half hour ago.
I'm sure that there are people